I've always been protective of my younger sister. She's 3 years younger than me and has been into running since she was little. While I focused on martial arts, she found her passion in track and cross country. Our parents have always supported our different interests, and we've been each other's biggest cheerleaders. This story happened last spring when my sister was training for the state cross country championships. She had to qualify through local competitions first, and there was this one race that I'll never forget. Not because of my sister's performance, but because of what happened afterward. I was there to support her at the local qualifying race. It was a beautiful day, perfect for running, and my sister was in high spirits as she got ready at school. That's when everything started going downhill. This woman approached my sister while she was stretching. She asked my sister if she was entering the race that day. When my sister confirmed she was, the woman declared that her child was going to enter and win. My sister just laughed politely and wished her daughter good luck. That's when things got weird. The woman started screaming, accusing my sister of laughing at her daughter and questioning if my sister thought her daughter wasn't eligible to race. My sister tried to calm her down, explaining that she'd never even seen her daughter. This only made the woman more furious. She started ranting about how my sister must think she's too popular to know her daughter. When my sister attempted to ask her to lower her voice, the woman screamed at her not to tell her what to do. My sister tried to leave, explaining that her ears were sensitive to loud noises. That's when the woman made her first threat. She told my sister that if she didn't let her daughter win, she would break her leg. My sister just brushed it off with an "okay, whatever," and walked away. Just before the race began, my sister was warming up when she noticed this woman giving her death stares. Being the kind person she is, my sister actually went up to ask what was wrong. The woman repeated her threat, pointing to her daughter and insisting that my sister better let her win, or she'd break her leg. My sister tried to defuse the situation by calmly agreeing, but this just made the woman angrier about my sister's attitude. My sister just said okay and walked away, while the woman responded by giving her the middle finger. The race started, and my sister took the lead right from the beginning. It was a 2-kilometer cross-country course, and she was in her element. I watched proudly as she maintained her lead and crossed the finish line first. After congratulating her, I told her I was going to grab some snacks and asked her to wait for me. That's when everything went completely sideways. When I returned about 5 minutes later, I found my sister crying in pain on a bench, her leg bleeding. A bystander quickly filled me in on what had happened. The woman had stormed up to my sister, screaming about how dare she win the race and upset her daughter, questioning if my sister had any feelings at all. Her daughter tried to calm her down, whispering that it didn't matter, but the woman insisted it did matter. She brought up the popularity thing again and accused my sister of disrespecting her daughter. When my sister tried to calm her down again, the woman just got more enraged, telling her not to dare tell her what to do. Then she actually grabbed my sister and threw her down onto some rocks. There was a loud snap when my sister's leg hit the ground. The woman looked satisfied and mockingly told my sister to enjoy the state cross-country meet. Through her tears and pain, my sister asked what the woman's problem was. The woman's daughter helped my sister onto a bench and apologized profusely for her mother's behavior, begging for forgiveness. But her mother just got angry at her too, telling her daughter not to apologize to the witch who didn't let her win. When I heard what happened, I asked someone to call an ambulance since my phone was in the car. Then I walked up to this woman and punched her as hard as I could. She went down immediately. The police and ambulance arrived shortly after. I had to pay a fine for punching her, but it was worth it. During their investigation, the police found drugs in her car, and she was charged with child abuse on top of that. My sister couldn't compete in the state championships because of her broken leg, but our mom took that woman to court. Not only did we win damages for medical expenses and pain and suffering, but the woman ended up serving time for the assault and drug possession. Her daughter went to live with her father, who turned out to be a much more stable parent. After graduating with my business degree and finding the job market completely saturated, I ended up taking what I thought would be a temporary position at a pet insurance company's customer service department. 2 years later, I was still there, handling calls from pet owners who ranged from absolutely delightful to completely unhinged. Anyone who's worked in customer service knows it's not for the faint of heart. You're basically a human punching bag for things completely outside your control. Accounting made a mistake, you get yelled at. Policy writers change something, that's somehow your fault too. But nothing could have prepared me for my encounter with what I now call the Great Policy Cancellation Incident. It started as any other Monday morning. I'd already handled 3 calls about premium increases and one about a declined claim when my phone rang again. I answered with my usual cheerful greeting, introducing myself and offering assistance. The response I got was an immediate huff and an aggravated tone that made me want to pour myself a stronger coffee. The woman, who I'll call Karen, snapped at me about how long she'd been waiting and demanded to switch her policy immediately. I politely asked for her policy number, which she rattled off like she was firing bullets. I pulled up her file and saw she had a large senior dog who'd been to the vet just the day before. Karen immediately launched into complaints about how useless her current policy was, explaining that it didn't cover what her aging dog needed anymore. She insisted on switching to a better policy. I took a deep breath, already knowing where this was heading. I carefully explained that while I could help her explore other policy options, any condition diagnosed during yesterday's vet visit would be considered pre-existing and wouldn't be covered under a new policy. There was a pause, and I could practically hear her blood pressure rising through the phone. She began arguing, insisting that she needed all of her dog's conditions covered, everything, and demanded that I make it cheaper too. I calmly explained her options. She could either keep her current policy, which covered several conditions for her dog, or switch to a new policy. However, I made it clear that with any new policy, conditions diagnosed in the past 2 years wouldn't be covered. She accused us of trying to scam her and demanded that we switch her policy while covering everything. I apologetically explained that I didn't make the rules and that these were our standard policy terms across the industry. What followed was a string of profanity that would make a sailor blush. I quietly turned down my headset volume and checked my phone messages while she ranted. It's a little-known secret that customer service representatives perfect the art of selective listening during these tirades. Finally, she screamed at me to cancel the policy, calling me a witch before hanging up. The line went dead, and I smiled. She'd just made a crucial mistake. We were required by law to cancel policies when requested by customers, even if they were shouting it in anger. I documented the call, included her exact words, and processed the cancellation. Not even 5 minutes later, I saw my colleague flinch as they answered their phone. I knew immediately who it was and motioned for them to transfer the call to me. I greeted her with the same cheerful tone as before. Karen immediately started yelling, identifying me as the person who canceled her policy. I confirmed that I had indeed processed the cancellation as per her request during our previous call. She tried to claim she hadn't given permission, but I reminded her of her exact words. This only made her angrier, and she demanded that I reinstate the policy. I had to explain that once a policy was canceled, we couldn't reinstate it, but offered to help her set up a new one. She grudgingly agreed, grumbling her acceptance. I started the new policy application process, making sure to follow our script word for word. When I reached the part about pre-existing conditions, explaining that nothing diagnosed or treated in the past 2 years would be covered, she interrupted to ask about her dog's previous conditions. She wanted to know if those would still be covered. I had to break the news that since the previous policy was canceled, all of her dog's medical history would now be considered pre-existing conditions. The explosion that followed was spectacular. She demanded to speak to my manager, which I'd anticipated. I'd already briefed my manager on the situation, and they were ready. My manager calmly explained that I had followed proper procedure and that we were legally required to process cancellation requests. Karen tried to argue that she'd said it in anger and hadn't meant it, but my manager simply reminded her that this should serve as a lesson to think carefully before making such requests. Karen threatened to sue us and report us to everyone she could think of. My manager calmly told her that all our calls were recorded, including her explicit cancellation request, suggesting this might be a good reminder to think before speaking in the future. She tried to get coverage with other pet insurance companies, but of course they all had the same pre-existing condition clauses. Her moment of angry demands had cost her all the coverage she'd built up over years. A week later, she tried to write a negative review online about how we tricked her into canceling her policy. The company's legal team responded by posting the transcript of her cancellation request. I have always been a jack of all trades. By my late 30s, I had jumped between being an information technology specialist, programmer, cook, and retailer. Life has taken me through various paths, and honestly, I wouldn't have it any other way. Each job taught me something different, but my college years, those were something else entirely. This story takes place during my college days. I was staying over at my friend's apartment near campus. You know the type: cheap rent, paper-thin walls, mostly occupied by students. It might as well have been a dorm. The neighborhood wasn't the safest, especially late at night, which is why I often crashed at his place after our Dungeons and Dragons sessions. That one night we had just wrapped up an intense campaign around 1 a.m. My friend and I were total nerds, and proud of it. We were both under 21, more interested in slaying dragons than partying. Everything was fine until 5 a.m. rolled around. That's when it started. The most ear-splitting metal music I'd ever heard, blasting from his roommate's room right next door. I jolted awake, my heart practically jumping out of my chest. I asked my friend what that awful noise was. He casually explained it was just his roommate's morning routine. Shocked, I questioned if this happened every morning at 5 a.m. My friend confirmed it did, mentioning that he'd tried asking his roommate to turn it down. When I pressed about the roommate's response, my friend admitted the guy just told him to get lost. Who plays metal music at full volume at 5 a.m. in an apartment complex? When I asked my friend about how long this had been happening, he told me it had been going on for about 3 months, so regularly you could set your watch to it. This got under my skin, which isn't easy to do. I'm usually pretty laid back, but this was ridiculous. While the roommate was out, we decided to investigate his room. It was a mess, clothes everywhere, empty food containers, but what caught my eye was his stereo system. It wasn't top of the line, but it was decent enough. That's when the idea hit me. We headed to this now defunct electronics store and bought some supplies. The plan was simple but devious. We got some mini speakers and a really long cable. While he was out, we carefully ran the cable under his carpet and connected it to his stereo's output channel, placing the speakers right under his pillow. We made sure to hide everything perfectly. The cables, the connections, everything. But the crown jewel of our plan was a microphone. We waited until he came home and went to bed. Thankfully, he was a heavy sleeper. Once we were sure he was out cold, we snuck back in and turned his stereo to maximum volume. The speakers under his pillow were ready to go. I checked with my friend if he was ready, and he gave me the green light to proceed. We positioned the microphone near his head and connected it to the system. For those who don't know, when you put a microphone too close to speakers playing its own input, it creates this horrible feedback loop. Now imagine that, but right under your pillow at full volume. The screech that erupted was legendary. It wasn't just loud, it was like a banshee had possessed his stereo system. The roommate jumped so high he practically hit the ceiling. He stumbled around his room, hands over his ears, trying to figure out what was happening. He shouted in confusion, demanding to know what was going on. My friend innocently responded by asking if the volume was too loud, claiming he was just getting ready for his day. He couldn't hear properly for the next day. Every conversation became a comedy show, with people talking normally and him constantly asking them to speak up because he couldn't hear them. He never played his metal music at 5 a.m. again. The security company I worked at mainly handled cash services. You know, those armored trucks you see delivering money around town. The branch I worked at was pretty small, just a handful of routes and people. Within 2 years, I somehow became the most senior person there. That should have been a warning sign, but I actually enjoyed it. The boss and I got along great, and the small team made it feel like a tight-knit group. My seniority earned me a whole 60 cents more per hour than everyone else. Wow, right? Everything was going smoothly until this guy showed up. He'd worked with us about a year ago and wanted to come back part-time while keeping his other full-time job. The boss was thrilled about it. He excitedly told me how perfect it was since the guy already knew our procedures and we could use the extra help. I agreed it sounded good and asked when he'd start. The boss said next week and assured me nothing would change with my schedule. That lasted about 3 weeks before everything went sideways. I started noticing my schedule getting shorter and shorter. Instead of my usual 5 days, I was down to 4, and they were all shorter routes. I couldn't even hit 40 hours anymore. When I tried talking to the boss about it, his response floored me. I brought up how my hours had been cut significantly and asked what was going on. He brushed it off, saying they were just trying to accommodate everyone's schedule, like it was no big deal. When I mentioned that I couldn't pay my bills on these hours, he got smug. He told me I was welcome to look for other work if I was unhappy, but claimed I wouldn't find anything better in this area. The smug look on his face when he said that lit a fire under me. I started job hunting that same day. For 2 weeks, I kept quiet and played nice while sending out applications. Then this Monday, I got exactly what I needed. A job offer paying over $1 more per hour, working from home with guaranteed 40+ hours and consecutive days off. When I handed in my notice, the boss's face went through about 5 different emotions in 10 seconds. He couldn't believe I was serious and demanded to know where I'd find better than this. I just smiled sweetly and slid my offer letter across his desk, telling him I'd already found it, and this was my 2 weeks' notice. He started stammering about needing me there and asked who would cover my routes. I simply told him that sounded like a management problem, not mine. They tried to punish me by putting me on driver duty for my last 2 weeks, letting the new guy get more experience. They thought they were sticking it to me, but they actually gave me the easiest job, just driving from stop to stop while someone else does all the heavy lifting. Yesterday, I overheard the boss on the phone with corporate, practically begging for approval to increase the starting wage because nobody was applying for my position. Turns out nobody wants to risk their life transporting millions in cash for barely above minimum wage. Who would have thought? The part-timer who needed my hours, he quit after 3 weeks because the schedule was too demanding. Now the boss has to cover my routes himself because they can't find anyone willing to work for what they're offering. This morning, my boss tried one last time. He suggested we could work something out and offered to match my new job's offer. I told him I'd already signed the contract and that it wasn't just about the money anymore. When he asked what that was supposed to mean, I explained that I'd learned something valuable here. Loyalty means nothing if it only goes one way. Tomorrow's my last day, and I'm looking forward to sleeping in on Monday while the boss scrambles to cover my route.